underestimate what that could mean. Because in some people's mind, that means, well, you're going to have to Xerox or photocopy your ID to send it in to prove you are who you are. Well, there are a whole lot of people, especially people who live in rural communities, who don't. There's no Kinkos, there's no Office Max near them. People have to understand.
Wait, did she really just say that? We're talking about the fundamental right to vote, and the argument is that people can't find a Xerox machine? You have to see how this disconnect plays out when the cameras are actually rolling. This is exactly why the headlines are exploding right now.
But in one recent Pew poll, 83% of adults support requiring photo ID to vote. 71% of Democrats favor requiring photo ID. Is that something that you can support? And if not, why not?
It's still going to be something, Jonathan. It's still going to be something that disenfranchises people that don't have the proper real ID, driver's license ID, that don't have the ID necessary to vote, even though they are citizens. This is another way to simply try to suppress the vote. And the last thing I think we want to do is discourage more people, more citizens from voting. And if he loses the vote, and I think the Republicans now expect they'll get a real drubbing in the midterms, he's prepared to try to take some kind of action to overturn the result. And we really shouldn't question that. We saw him try to the point of insurrection to overturn the 2020 election. We see him now taking these extraordinary steps with an election now 5 years ago. He's basically telling us he intends to interfere in this upcoming election.
Look at the body language here. Adam Schiff is literally being handed a silver platter of data. 83% of Americans and over 70% of his own party want voter ID. But instead of acknowledging the shift, he pivots straight back to a disenfranchisement talking point that his own voters clearly aren't buying anymore. It's like he's reading from a 2004 playbook while the world has moved on to digital everything. You can see the moment he realizes the voter suppression angle is losing its teeth, when even his base is saying, actually, we're okay with showing an ID. It's a fascinating study in political inertia. He's trying to protect a narrative that the public has already moved past, and the tension in that interview is thick enough to cut with a knife. If you're wondering why there's such a massive gap between leadership and the actual voters, this clip is the smoking gun.
Somalia's electoral authorities have started issuing voter ID cards across Mogadishu as the capital prepares for its first direct municipal council elections in decades under a one-person, one-vote system. Printing at the Somali Independent Election Committee headquarters operates around the clock in 2 8-hour shifts, producing an estimated 30,000 to 40,000.
This is the ultimate reality check. We just heard arguments about how hard it is to get an ID in the most prosperous nation on earth. And then you see Somalia, a country literally rebuilding from the ground up, running 24-hour shifts to print 40,000 ID cards a day. It totally dismantles the "it's too burdensome" argument. If Mogadishu can figure out the logistics of a one-person, one-vote system with secure photo identification, the idea that a rural American can't find a way to verify their identity starts to sound a bit insulting, doesn't it? It's wild to see the contrast. One side is treating voters like they aren't capable of basic administrative tasks, while a war-torn nation is treating the ID as a badge of empowerment and progress. It really makes you rethink the entire suppression debate when you see what actual effort looks like on a global scale.
You are pushing hard to redraw Maryland's congressional map to further benefit Democrats. And what that means is eliminating the only Republican-held seat that exists right now. The map, as it stands, is already really gerrymandered, done before you got there. How is it good for democracy to pursue a map that makes your state even less representative?
Well, actually, the map that the Maryland House passed would actually make 6 of the 8 congressional districts more competitive than less. And frankly, one of the most gerrymandered seats inside of the state of Maryland is actually the Republican.
Catch the logic jump here with Governor Wes Moore. He's being asked how eliminating the only Republican seat in his state helps democracy. And his answer is basically, well, we're making the other districts more competitive. It's a masterclass in political gymnastics. He's literally defending gerrymandering by calling it an improvement. If you look closely at the reporter's face, she's not even trying to hide the skepticism. It's one of those moments where the saving democracy rhetoric crashes headfirst into the reality of maintaining power. He's essentially saying that to make things fair, they have to remove the opposition's footprint entirely. It's a bold strategy to admit to on live television, even if you wrap it in fancy academic terms about competitive districts.
I understand you don't support things like a passport, for example, but requiring basic ID in order to vote is really popular. A Pew poll from a few months ago showed 83% of Americans, including 71% of your fellow Democrats, support requiring an ID to vote. Why are they wrong?
I haven't said that they're wrong. We know that states are the ones who are empowered to conduct elections, and every state should be allowed to decide the best way to proceed to ensure that there's a free and fair election. Here in New York, there are, in fact, voter identification requirements. The question is that what Republicans are trying to do is to engage in clear and blatant voter suppression. They know that if there's a free and fair election in November, they're going to lose. In fact, Republicans have been losing every single election since Donald Trump was sworn in January of last year, including most recently decisively in Texas, and of course, losing all across the country, up and down the ballot in the November off-year elections in places like New Jersey or Virginia or New York.
Watch Hakeem Jeffries here. He's the leader of the House Democrats, and he's being confronted with the same popular ID poll. His strategy? Deflect to Texas and Virginia. He completely ignores the question about why 71% of his own party supports ID, and instead launches into a stump speech about Republican losses. It's a classic don't look at the data, look at the scoreboard move. But the problem is, the scoreboard he's pointing to doesn't change the fact that his own constituents want a policy he's calling suppression. It's this weird feedback loop where the leaders are terrified of a policy that the followers are actually asking for.
Especially people who live in rural communities who don't, there's no Kinkos, there's no Office Max near them. People have to understand that when we're talking about voter ID laws, be clear about who you have in mind and what would be required of them to prove who they are. Of course, people have to prove who they are, but not in a way that makes it almost impossible for them to prove who they are.
This is where the Kinko's logic really falls apart. The idea that rural Americans are so isolated they can't photocopy a document is just, it's a bit much. Most people in those communities are the most self-reliant folks you'll ever meet. Telling them they're incapable of getting an ID because there isn't an Office Max nearby is a very specific kind of coastal elitism that usually backfires. It's almost like the politicians are living in a completely different reality than the people they represent. Is voter ID actually the threat they say it is, or is the public just done with the excuses? Drop a comment below. I want to know if you think the Kinko's argument holds any weight in 2026. See you in the next one.